Shalom, this is Amonute Tayac of Piscataway, Sophia Spiritualite, your friendly neighborhood Shuman, and we're here with part 2 of a discussion that we started concerning the Francis Scott Key Bridge, the Star Spangled Banner, and Creon, the Americans, John Brown's body, May Day, and Memorial Day. So next we're going to go into the discussion of John Brown's body, May Day, and Memorial Day. Now, again, there are many of our people who, uh, based on, their own personal research, decided that all the holidays that we celebrate are actually, for some reason, they're all bad. They're not our holidays. And so I wanted to get into this last year, but I didn't get a chance to. So we're going to talk about John Brown's body, May Day and Memorial Day. Now, May Day and Memorial Day are both black holidays, just so you understand. And we're going to talk a little bit about each. But particularly Memorial Day, and being from Maryland, like I said, I'm familiar with this because we have it's near College Park, but it's a circle, and it's called Peace Crossing, and it has a big giant cross in the middle of a traffic circle, and that memorial was put there to commemorate the lives lost in this War of 1812, I believe, or the Revolutionary War, one or the other. I can't remember right now, but as a former University of Maryland student or University of Maryland graduate, I've been around that circle hundreds of times, hundreds. And so I knew that remembering our people who had fought in these wars, it was central to my upbringing, being that I'm from a black area, a black county. We celebrated May Day, we celebrated Memorial Day. We took these things very seriously. They were very well planned out and whatnot. And so I found it confusing when I started studying like the Hebrew stuff, and people just had written off all the holidays. And I was like, well, we've been celebrating these things for like almost 100 years. Like I'm not sure I understand why these things are bad. And I maintain that, hey, if my grandmother celebrated it, I'm celebrating it to keep her tradition, and if for no other reason. And I always believed that my family did things that were decent and right because I knew how my family was. And I know everybody haven't come to that conclusion with their family, but that's the conclusion I came to. So I never gave up any of my holidays. And as I have been studying specifically the origins of these holidays, I started finding out, hey, all of these holidays, literally, they got something to do with us. And so denying these holidays is denying yourself, particularly May Day and Memorial Day. And so since these are coming up and everybody wants you to focus on the eclipse, to this, to that, we got to look forward because it's right around the corner. Okay. So let's get to John Brown's raid. Okay, so John Brown's raid was on Harper's Ferry, which is in Maryland. Well, half of it's on Maryland. Well, it's in West Virginia, but it was Virginia at the time because there was no West Virginia. Let me just that's the best way to put it. But Maryland is right across the border. All right. All right, it took place on October 16th through 18th, 1859 to initiate a slave revolt in the southern states by taking over the United States Arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia, since 1863, West Virginia. It has been called the dress rehearsal or the tragic prelude to the American Civil War. Oh, yeah, the Peace Crossing is for the Civil War. I'm sorry. All right. John Brown's party of 22 was defeated by a company of U.S. Marines led by First Lieutenant Israel Green. 10 of the raiders were killed during the raid, 7 tried and executed afterwards, and 5 escaped. Several of those present at the raid would later be involved in the Civil War. Colonel Robert Lee was in overall command of the operation to retake the arsenal. Stonewall Jackson and Jeb Stuart were among the troops guarding the arrested Brown, and John Wilkes Booth was a spectator at John Brown's execution. Just to show you how much John Wilkes Booth hated black people. Okay, John Brown had originally asked Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, both of whom he had met in his transformative years as an abolitionist in Springfield, Massachusetts, to join him in this raid, but Tubman was prevented by illness and Douglass declined as he believed Brown's plan was suicidal. The raid was extensively covered in the... So our people, again, are like, although I bet Harriet would have showed up. No doubt about it. All right, she was gangster, but she was sick. Okay, the raid was extensively covered in the press nationwide. It was the first such national crisis to be publicized using the new electrical telegraph. Reporters were on the first train leaving for Harper's Ferry after the news of the raid was received 4 p.m. on Monday, October the 17th. It carried Maryland militia and parked on the Maryland side of Harper's Ferry Bridge just 3 miles east of the town, at the hamlet of Sandy Hook, Maryland. As there were few official messages to send or receive, the telegraph carried on the next train connected to the cut telegraph wires was given up to reporters who are enforced strong as military. But Tuesday morning, the telegraph line had been repaired, and the reporters from the New York Times and other distant papers. Brown's raid caused such excitement and anxiety throughout the United States, with the South seeing it as a threat to slavery and thus their way of life, and some in the North perceiving it as a bold abolitionist action. At first, it was generally viewed as madness, as the work of a fanatic. It was Brown's words and letters after the raid and his trial, Virginia versus John Brown, aided by the writings of supporters, including Henry David Thoreau, that turned him into a hero and an icon for the Union. Okay, so really it wasn't a raid. They used the term insurrection. So if you want to know the first quote-unquote insurrection, who they have really tied Trump to with using the term insurrection, is John Brown. This is why the particular prophecy related to Trump, which I can't discuss because my conditions have not been met yet, and I won't until my conditions are met. This is why it will be fulfilled in the way that it was, because truly Trump is taking on the moniker of John Brown in this case. And as we read more about this, it's kind of undeniable, okay? All right, we're not going to talk about all of this. But let me just put it this way. He got a whole group of people, 22 people, that he his little militia he put together, right? So this is well documented. I suggest, if you're interested in this kind of thing, go look at the read this article on Wikipedia. It'll give you a good idea of what's going on. I'm not going to go into all of this because it's really the legacy that he left is the one. So remember now, John Brown terrified these people, and he became an icon of the abolitionist movement and of the Civil War. He and his group of people scared these people so bad that they basically have been fighting back against black people and white people who stand up for black people since 1859. So this is not like a new thing. This is always, our allies and our friends have always been targets. Okay, the people who are trying to do the right thing, they all have always been target. And the first such word they use to target is insurrection and treason and rebellion. Okay, they didn't use raid at the time. They used insurrection. Now, how is it an insurrection? Them taking over freaking where ammunition was kept. That's an insurrection. Okay, let's just so you know how these people use the language, okay, against us. So John Brown's Body, or the John Brown Song, is a United States marching song about the abolitionist John Brown. The song was popular in the Union during the American Civil War. The song arose out of a folk hymn tradition of the American camp meeting movement in the late 18th and 19th century. Let's take a look at that. I think that's a church thing. The camp meeting tradition fostered a tradition. The camp meeting tradition fostered a tradition of music and hymn saying with strong oral, improvisational, and spontaneous elements. Hymns were taught and learned by rote, spontaneous, and improvisatory element was prized. Both tunes and words were chanted and adapted in true folk music fashion. So, what is a... Oh, here we go. Do I know this one? So Methodism, I'm a Methodist, so this is definitely something I know very, very well. I'm trying to think of one that people might know. Besides this one. Maybe y'all know Father Abraham, right? Father Abraham had many sons. Oh no, Deep and Wide. Deep and wide, deep and wide, there's a river flowing deep and wide. Deep and wide, deep and wide, there's a river flowing deep and wide. That is a call and response. So this one, that's what this came out of our people having church the way that we have church, which is why technically the orthodoxy was adapted into these different ways. Like I said, I grew up Methodist, but a lot of what we did in church when I was young is what they do in the Orthodox church, because they come from the same tradition. They just kind of do things a little bit different, especially with black people. We added our own flavor to things, as we always done. It's like mixing together a carnival with a church service. That's basically like kind of what you're thinking of. And you probably may have heard of like the camp movement. You know, when they have tent revivals and stuff like that, that's kind of like the camp meeting movement. It's when they return to services outside, which, you know, is quote unquote pagan in nature because it's from our people. So anyway, all right. According to an 1899 account, the original John Brown lyrics were a collective effort by a group of Union soldiers who were referring to both the famous John Brown and also humorously to a Sergeant John Brown of their own battalion. Various other authors have published additional verses or claimed credit for originating the John Brown lyrics and tunes. So this, you know, is from our people. The flavor of coarseness, possibility of irreverence, led many of the era to feel uncomfortable with the earliest John Brown lyrics. This in turn led to the creation of many variant versions of the text that aspire to a higher literary quality. So this is where you get like the whole concept of the Anacreon song, like, oh, you know, we like the song, but like, let's, you know, not be so loose with our words, right? All right. The most famous of these is Julia Ward Howe's Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was written when a friend suggested, why do you not write some good words for that stirring tune? So the Battle Hymn Republic came after John Brown's Bones. They was already singing John Brown's Body. I keep saying Bones. They were already singing John Brown's Body when the Battle Hymn of the Republic came. So they tied the Battle Hymn of the Republic to John Brown's Body. This is why, again, you would sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic when you're trying to fight off certain American quote-unquote entities and deities, because it's tied to John Brown's Body, tied to insurrection, tied to scaring the bejesus out of them with a few people. It does something to them, which is why you hear every song sung at these football games except the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And this is one of the songs we sang in I sung in high school. All right. All right, they say that maybe Lincoln made this suggestion, but it's not true. Not known. All right, numerous informal versions and adaptations of the lyrics and music have been created from the mid 1800s to the present, making John Brown's Body a example of a living folk music tradition. So when I did my version last year, like I said, I'll share that. I was participating in this living folk tradition. And that's one thing I want to point out to our people. Our traditions are always evolving. We don't stagnate with our traditions. So when you have traditions that are more fixed in nature, that's not how our people are. We're always evolving. We're always bringing in new ideas, bringing in new things, and mixing it with our tradition. This is how you get a mixed multitude coming out of Egypt. You know what I mean? This is what this means. Is taking the best of what someone else has in their religion and adding it into what we have to make everyone feel comfortable. And it's done in a way that doesn't negate the integrity of our own personal traditions, right? Okay. All right. So, well, Say Brother Will You Meet Us is a tune that came first, right? So, oh, brothers, will you meet me? Oh, sisters, will you meet me? Oh, mourners, will you meet me? Oh, sinners, will you meet me? Something like that, right? Right. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Okay, so y'all get the idea, right? All right, we're not going to go through all this whole thing because it's a lot. Let's just go to the lyrics. Oh, this is how I found out about this. Let's talk about this because it's gonna come in. On May 1st, 1865, we're going to go talk about this next. In Charleston, South Carolina, recently freed African Americans and some white missionaries held a parade of 10,000 people, led by 3,000 black children singing John Brown's Body. The march honored 257 dead Union soldiers whose remains the organizers had reburied from a mass grave in a Confederate prison camp. This is considered the first observation of Decoration Day, now known as Memorial Day. We could call it Decoration Day. We don't have to call it Memorial Day. They went and they decorated the graves. Now, let's talk about that, because I thought that was... What? Is this here? Okay. All right. Celebrated the last Monday in May, Memorial Day marks the beginning of summer. Families fire up the grill, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Memorial Day grew out of the grief and tragedy wrought by the Civil War, and to appreciate the day and continue its traditions, one must first understand the context from which it arose. On April 9th, 1865, at the McLean House in Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army of the Northern Virginia to General Ulysses S. Grant, commander of the armies of the United States. Though it took another few months for the remaining Confederate armies to follow Lee's example and hostilities to end, Lee's surrender signaled the close to the bloodiest 4 wars in U.S. history. By the end of the Civil War, some 750,000 Americans in the North and South, more than 2% of the population, had been killed. In 2013 numbers, such a percentage would exact a death toll of more than 6.3 million Americans. Listen, didn't we... How many people live in Maryland? Would it not be 6.3 million? Don't y'all remember that from the first video? Okay. As historian Drew Gilpin Faust notes in her vivid portrayal of the death and Civil War, this republic of suffering. During the war, loss became commonplace. Death's threat, its proximity, and its actuality became the most widely shared of the war's experiences. We're not going to read all of that. Dying away from home was especially distressing prospect for the Civil War Americans. The last words of the dying were given an especial significance by those Victorian Christians, for they represented the state of soon-to-be departed eternal soul. Parents and siblings who were given news of their loved ones' injuries rushed to the battlefield hospital to care for their dying beloved and to witness his final moments. More often, news came too late, if at all. So others try to record the last breaths of their dying comrades, or in some cases, of their enemy. Hospital workers and other civilians likewise tried to bridge the divide between the battlefield and home, writing letters to next of kin, encouraging soldiers to write to their families, and filling in for absent mothers and fathers. Many did so with the hope that their own soldiers might be received the same care elsewhere should they need it. One popular wartime song describes the gratitude those at home have for such nurses and caregivers. Listen, our people, we always did this. See, they want to try and make you think this is not how we are. No, this is how we always been. We go into a place, if somebody is dying, taking care of the mourners and the sufferers, stepping up. This is what we do. We fill the gaps. We are the hands and the feet of the Most High, and this is just another way that is proved to be true. This is what we do. We fill in for what the Most High has going on. This is what we do. Okay? Being buried away from home was a constant worry for the soldiers themselves. Letters from the period are filled with the soldiers' wishes to be buried in their family plots, and some dying soldiers used their last written words to describe where they had fallen so their families could come and retrieve their bodies. Death is near, wrote 26-year-old James Montgomery in a bloodstained letter to his father in Mississippi. I will die far from home. I would like to rest in the graveyard with my dear mother and brothers. His sentiment was a common one. When a family came looking for their deceased, their search, even if they knew generally where to look, often ended in anguish. The Montgomery family, despite their efforts, never found James' grave. Due to the incredible scale of carnage, the bodies of most dead soldiers were, of necessity, treated impersonally. Though an officer could expect that his body would be sent home to his family, the remains of the enlisted were treated with less care. Burial was haphazard, frequently in mass, especially if the graves were for the enemy of the dead. It was not uncommon for shallowly dug burial grounds to give up their dead when a change of the weather demanded them. Their eyes were watching God. Anyway, given the broad reach of death, soon after the Civil War ended, grassroots efforts to honor the dead arose. Citizens first sought to identify and properly bury the fallen soldiers. Clara Barton, a Civil War nurse, which some of y'all should have heard of, and founder of the American Red Cross, established a missing soldiers office to help families find information about their missing loved ones. Edmund Burke Whitman, a quartermaster during the war, became the superintendent of America's new national cemeteries, established by Congress in 1867, and led expeditions to the war-torn South to find the buried Union dead. With the aid of black troops and former slaves, he located more than 100,000 graves. By 1870, the nation had reinterred some 300,000 Union soldiers in the new federal cemeteries. Roughly 120,000 of them remain unidentified. In April 18, these are your ancestors. For real, these are your ancestors. Anyway, in April of 1865, the month that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, blacks in Charleston, South Carolina, performed their own reburial service. 4 long years after the war had begun, the city lay in ruins. Most of the city's white population had deserted the city and were not around to see the 21st U.S. Colored Infantry Regiment march into Charleston that spring. The regiment was instead greeted by thousands of former slaves who still lived there. During the final years of the war, Confederates had converted the city's Washington Race Course and Jockey Club into an outdoor prison, and at least 250 Union soldiers succumbed to exposure and disease there. And when they say, oh, well, the Japanese were the only ones that were held in internment camps, what do you call this? It was an outdoor prison. They didn't even, in South Carolina. Y'all know how hot it is in the South? Okay. Y'all, this stuff really, it gets to me. All right. Now, a small group of black workmen reburied the Union dead who had been buried in a mass grave behind the track's grandstand and built a whitewashed fence around the new cemetery, naming it Martyrs of the Racecourse. These are our martyrs. On May 1st, 10,000 Charlestonians, many of them former slaves, paraded around the slaveholders' racecourse, with the procession led by 3,000 black children carrying flowers and singing John Brown's Body. The children were followed by 300 black women representing the Patriotic Association, a group organized to distribute clothing and other goods among the freed people. The women carried baskets of flowers, wreaths, and crosses to the burial ground. The Mutual Aid Society, a benevolent association of black men, next marched in cadence around the track into the cemetery, followed by large crowds of white and black citizens. They declared the meaning of the war in the most public way possible, by their labor, their words, and their songs, and their solemn parade of roses, lilacs, and marching feet on the old planters' racecourse. One can only guess at which passages where scripture were read at the graveside on this first Memorial Day. But among the burial rites, the spirit of Leviticus was sure there. For it is the Jubilee. It shall be holy unto you. In the year of this Jubilee, ye shall return every man unto his possession. After the dedication of the cemetery, the crowds retired to hear speeches, enjoy picnics, and watch parading Union soldiers, much like modern-day Memorial Day. Other cities, approximately 25, also claim to be progenitor of Memorial Day, originally called Decoration Day. In March 1866, for example, nearly a year after the parade in Charleston, the Ladies Memorial Association of Columbus, Georgia, set aside April 26 as a day to wreath the graves of our martyred dead with flowers, and encourage women elsewhere to do the same. In many southern states, April 26 is still celebrated as Confederate Memorial Day. In 1966, Congress and Lyndon Johnson tried to settle the question by declaring Waterloo, New York, as the birthplace of Memorial Day, for it was there that on May 5th, 1866, businesses closed and residents flew flags at half-staff in commemoration of the Civil War dead, right? So, I'm not going to read the rest of this because that's the important part. Lyndon B. Johnson wanted to take it away from the Negro, like he did everything, absolutely everything, and said, "Oh no, it started in New York." Okay, but here we see it was our people, specifically our women and children, who led the cause in setting this day up. Now, what many of y'all don't know, and I will tell you, is that there is a ritual surrounding walking around in a circle, singing and whatnot. And this ritual is celebrated by the Orthodox for Pascha, which is Easter, Orthodox Easter. And with that ceremony, you walk around the church counterclockwise. You walk around the church counterclockwise. You're holding a candle, and while you're on the outside of the church, what's happening on the inside of the church is they're removing the body of Jesus that they have laid out, setting it back up where it normally sets for the rest of the year. They're putting a lot of flowers out in a celebration. And then as soon as midnight hits, now remember, Orthodox Easter service takes place at 11:30 at night. As soon as 12 o'clock hits, the lights come on in the church, the bells start ringing, and everybody starts singing. So this ceremony is traditional to the church, to the Orthodox Church. And as you can see, the slaves brought this same tradition, or former slaves or Americans, the native born Americans brought this same tradition and used it to celebrate their dead, their martyrs, which they're calling here their martyrs, which of course Jesus is a martyr, right? So you have this tradition being held. When I read this last year, when we found this last year, it was clear to me that a lot of the traditions is being held in the Orthodox churches. So I am hoping that explaining this, talking about this to y'all, you all will see what I'm talking about. And I'm not like just making it up. It's not coming out of nowhere. How do they know to do this? And even the dates. May 1st. Okay, remember this year, Orthodox Easter, Pascha, is on May the 5th. These people lined it up with the true Easter. How could they do that? Well, because the true Easter is based off celestial alignments. It's not random like the Roman church, the Roman Christian church. It's totally random. I can't figure out what the calendar is. This is based off of literal facts, literal alignments of the thing. And I'll bet if I look up the chart for these days, it's probably insane. You know, it's based off the celestial alignments. I might do that. Okay, so this is also about the first Decoration Day. And we can call it Decoration Day. We don't have to call it Memorial Day, right? Martyrs of the Race Course. Okay, at 9 a.m. on May 1st, the procession stepped off, led by 3,000 black schools. Can you imagine 3,000 children singing this song? Now remember, this was a song of insurrection. This is what this incited. This incited insurrection. So you have 3,000 children singing John Brown's Body. The children were followed by the women with the flowers, the wreaths and the crosses. Then came the men marching in cadence, followed by contingents of the infantry. They also sang "We'll Rally Around the Flag," the Star Spangled Banner, and several spirituals before black ministers read the scripture. Okay? I'm not going to read all of this. I will put these links in the thing so you can read it. The old racetrack is still there. I'm definitely going to go visit that. An oval roadway in Hampton Park in Charleston, named for Wayne Hampton, former Confederate general and the white supremacist Redeemer governor of South Carolina after the end of Reconstruction. The lovely part sits adjacent to the Citadel, the military academy of South Carolina, and cadets can be seen jogging on the old racetrack any day of the week. The old gravesite dedicated to the martyrs of the race course is gone. Those Union dead were reinterred in the 1880s to a national cemetery in Beaufort, South Carolina. Some stories endure, some disappear, some are rediscovered in dusty archives, the pages of old newspaper and in oral history. All such stories as the first Decoration Day are but a prelude to future reckonings. All memory is prelude. So we're going to definitely take this seriously this year. All right, let's keep going. We're almost done. All right, so let's talk about May Day. Now, mind you, they did this on May 1st, which is historically May Day. Now, why would they pick this day? And yes, it could have also aligned with Easter. So I'm not out. What's going on? Where's your pull up? Did you go to the potty? Okay, go put your pull up back on. Oh my Lord. Okay, let's talk about May Day. All right. May Day is a European Dodge the Hijack festival of ancient origins marking the beginning of summer. Okay, here, let me help you. Mommy, help you. Okay. Hold on your foot. I'm sorry, y'all. Hold on a second. There you go. Pull it up. There we go. All right, close my door. Thank you. All right, May Day is a European festival of ancient origins marking the beginning of summer, usually celebrated on May 1st, around halfway between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. Festivities may also be held the night before, known as May Eve. Traditions often include gathering wildflowers and green branches, weaving floral garlands, and crowning a May Queen, sometimes with a male companion, setting up a maypole, May tree, or May bush, in which the people dance. Bonfires are also a part of the festival in some regions. Regional varieties or related traditions include these ones. And let's talk about this. The earliest known May celebrations appeared with Floralia, the festival of Flora, the Roman goddess of flowers, held from 27 April to May 3rd. So this is all in the same time period. These quote unquote celebrations were first held, okay? During the Roman Republic area, and the Mayuma or Mayama festival celebrating Dionysus and Aphrodite, held every 3 years in the month of May. The Floralia opened with theatrical performances. In the Floralia, Ovid says that the hares and goats were released as a part of festivities. Perseus writes that crowds were pelted with vetches, beams, and lupins. A ritual called Florituum was performed either 27 April or May 3rd, during which a bundle of wheat ears was carried into a shrine, though it is not clear if this devotion was made for Flora or Ceres. Floralia concluded with the competitive events and spectacles and a sacrifice to Flora. So this is what they tied into this celebration, okay? Because the flowers, for sure, the celebrations, the speeches, and all of that is all tied into this. Mayoma was celebrated at least as early as the 2nd century AD, when records show expenses for the month-long festival were appropriated by Emperor Commodus. According to the 6th century chronicles of John Malalas, Mayoma was a nocturnal dramatic festival held every 3 years and known as orgies, that is, mysteries of Dionysus and Aphrodite, and that it was known as the Mayomas because it's celebrating during the month of May Artissimo. During this time, enough money was set aside by government for torches, lights, and other expenses to cover a 30-day festival of all-night revels. The Mayoma was celebrated with splendorous banquets and offerings. Its reputation for licentiousness caused it to be suppressed during the reign of Emperor Constantine, though a less debauched version of it was briefly restored during the reigns of Arcadius and Honorius, only to be suppressed again during the same period. Alright, here we go. Since the 18th century, many Roman Catholics have observed May and May Day with various May devotions to the Blessed Virgin Mary. In works of art, school skits, and so forth, Mary's head will often be adorned with flowers in a May crowning. 1st of May is also one of 2 feast days of the Catholic patron saint of the workers of Saint Joseph the Worker, a carpenter, husband to Mother Mary, and foster father of Jesus. Replacing another feast of Saint Joseph on this date was chosen by Pope Pius in 1955 to counterpoint the Communist International Workers' Day of May Day. The best known May traditions observed in both Europe and North America include dancing around the maypole and crowning the Queen of May, or Fae. Fading of popularity since the late 20th century is a tradition of giving May baskets, small baskets of sweets and flowers, usually left anonymously on neighbors' doorsteps. In the late 20th century, many neo-pagans began reconstructing some of the older pagan festivals and combining them with more recently developed European secular and Catholic traditions, and celebrating May Day as a pagan religious festival. So, as you can see, lots of stuff ties into here. This was the one I picked up last. So, alright, let's go back and we'll just wrap this up. So, as far as John Brown's body is concerned, you see that John Brown stood as an insurrectionist, as his memory haunts these people who want to have control without anybody coming in and actually doing anything against him. Right? So, his energy was evoked by our people when celebrating or developing a ceremony, a remembrance to actually remember those who died, those of our people who were martyred in these wars. And if you remember any of the martyr stories from last year, oftentimes these martyrs were put into giant coliseums and they were just watched until they died. And basically that's what happened in South Carolina. They didn't say that, but in so many words, when you know the story of the martyrs, you know that's exactly what would happen. That's how it would happen. And so In order to honor these martyrs, they what adorned the things with flowers, and because the bodies were buried and then reburied, they were taken care of appropriately. There was a celebration, and an offering made of them doing this march around this former slave owners racetrack, showing them who the might belonged to, who the power was. And it wasn't to them slave owners, and that's why they didn't like that. They were always so scared because our people didn't back down. They continue to move forward with their behavior. So I hope it's clear how all this ties together. And how this ties into, of course, the Americans. These were people who fought in these different wars. The Anacreon, that's the entity they use. It's all related. Stop. Enough. No. It's all related, and our history is so diverse. We really have to, pay attention to these different things and really look deeper, and don't just get caught up with the way that people describe it. So I could have looked at this Francis Scott Key thing and said, well, there's nothing there. But no, when I dug into it, it was clearly a lot there. It's clearly tied into all of this stuff. There's no, leave it alone. Okay, leave it alone. Come on. There's no, pretending like these things don't all tie together. And we are going to do our best to commemorate the memory of those martyrs that we have here on this land. For sure, martyrs that we have. Starting with, the martyrs of the racetrack. And it's important for us to evoke that energy moving forward, because those martyrs are the ones who are going to intercede for us on the other side. So we want to treat that day with as much care as we can, and just like we do with all holidays, because a lot of these holidays, like I said, they tie back into our origins. When you look deep enough, you find remnants of our people, and you'll the Holy Spirit will reveal to you how your DNA is tied up in all of that. Like me, I could clearly see how my people is tied up in all of this stuff. It's not hard, but I spent a long time trying to figure out who I am here on this land. And I know maybe other people haven't spent as much time doing that. And I encourage you to think about it. Figure out who you are here on this land, and what your legacy means to this land, because I think that's what's going to be dealt with first. Before we can deal with the other lands and the other peoples, we really have to deal with ourselves. So I hope this meets everyone well. I know I didn't read the lyrics to John Brown's Body song. Did I not see them? Hey, it's too late now. You can check. I'll leave the link so that you can do some further research on your own, right? So, shalom everybody, and we'll see you in the next video.